Hi, my name's Ian. I'm going to welcome you to another 5-minute family devotion here at Engadine and Heathcote Anglican Church. At 5-minute family devotions, we're going through God's big story, and we're looking at the story of the Bible and how God is working on each and every page of the Bible to bring us into relationship with Him once more. Over the last couple of weeks, we've learnt that God's people were in the land that God had promised them. It was really good. They were following God under King David, and then in the start of the time when King Solomon was king, things were great. But then it went bad. God's kings started following after pretend gods, and they forgot about God. God had warned His people over and over to keep on turning back to Him, but they kept on ignoring God. And so finally, enough was enough. God raised up other nations to come in and take them over. The Babylonians came in and took over Jerusalem, and God's people were carried away from their own land out to Babylon, and they were slaves and they were prisoners. And that's where our story starts today. It's from the book of Daniel, chapter 1. Now I wonder if God's people would keep on following Him when things were tough, or would they forget about God and follow other gods? Well, let's find out. Well, I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I've got my Bible in front of me. I've got it opened up to Daniel chapter 1, which is where today's story comes from. I'm going to read it out and I'm going to just stop and reflect on a couple of things. And if you've got a Bible in front of you, why don't you grab it and follow along with me as we read. Okay, let me start. In the 3rd year of King Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. He carried these off to the temple of his God in Babylon and put them in the treasure house of his God. It sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? God's people had been overtaken and God's temple had been raided. I wonder what was going to happen next. Well, then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of the court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. Young men without physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the people from Babylon. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table, and they were trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. Among those who were chosen, some were from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief officer gave them new names. Daniel, he named him Belshazzar. To Hananiah, he named Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Well, I wonder what life would be like for these 4 men. They were taken away from their land. They were put in a new land, and they were asked to follow a new king. I wonder what life would be like. They were really good guys, but would they stay following God? Let's find out. But Daniel resolved not to make himself unclean with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now God had caused the official to show favour and compassion to Daniel, but the official told Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see that you are looking worse than any of the other young men your age? The king would have my head because of you." Whoa. The guard, the person that was in charge of him, was a bit worried. What would happen if Daniel and his friends weren't going to eat the king's food? It would be bad for him. Wonder what Daniel said. Well, Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see." So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. 10 days of just eating vegetables and water. Gee, that was going to be tough. I wonder if God was going to be good to them during that time, because the other food was no doubt offered to other gods, and Daniel and his friends only wanted to follow God. Well, let's see what happened after the 10 days were up. At the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Wow! So even after this, they were better than everybody else in health, but Daniel also was blessed by God, as were the others. He gave them lots of wisdom because they followed God and trusted Him when they were challenged not to. What happened next? Well, at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found it none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They were the best. So they entered the king's service. In every manner of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them to be 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. Sounds like Daniel and his friends, by following God, they were blessed. I wonder how God was going to use them in the future as God's people were in Babylon. Well, Daniel and his friends were taken far, far away, and they were forced to serve a new king. They were under pressure to do what everybody else was doing, to obey the new king as if he was God. But they chose to say, no way. They chose to trust in God no matter what might happen. Boys and girls, we live in a world where people do whatever they want to do. We live among people who live their lives ignoring Jesus, and there's pressure for us to do what they want us to do. But if you have turned to Jesus, then Jesus always comes first, and He never does anything bad for us. He is always looking out for our good. So live in this world, but don't be like this world. Don't go along with what everybody else is doing. Make sure you love Jesus as number one and put Him first in absolutely everything. Well, in a couple of seconds, a couple of questions are going to come up on the board. And as a family, I'll invite you to read, to think, and to pray. And pause the video as you do each one of those together as a family. Remember, also keep on sending your photos in, and we'll say g'day to you in